My daughter-in-law donated my war medals to Goodwill. She called them old junk. She didn't ask. She didn't hesitate. She put a purple heart and a bronze star with a V for valor into a cardboard box with some old clothes and dropped it off. I am 81 years old. I served with the 1st Marine Division in Korea in the winter of 1952. Those medals weren't souvenirs. They were the only physical proof I had left of things I can barely describe. And with one trip to a donation bin, my family was about to learn what those pieces of metal really mean to the rest of the world. After my wife Elena passed 5 years ago, the house got quiet in a way I never could have prepared for. Our son Michael is 42. He married a woman named Chloe about 4 years back. I thought she was lovely. She was organized, she had a good career as a dental hygienist, and she seemed to make Michael happy. What I didn't see clearly then was how she viewed the past, my past, as something that was just taking up space. I live in a modest 3-bedroom house in Springfield, Virginia. Michael and Chloe live about 20 minutes away in a new townhouse development. After Elena died, Michael started coming by every other Sunday just to check in. Chloe would come sometimes, but often it was just him. We'd sit at the kitchen table, drink coffee, and talk about his work, about the neighbors, about nothing in particular. It was a quiet, steady rhythm. I was grateful for it. The medals and my service records were in the den, in a specific place. Not a display case, nothing like that. I'm not that kind of man. They were in a simple, dark walnut box on the top shelf of the bookcase, behind a set of old engineering manuals from my second career. The box itself was a gift from Elena. Inside, the purple heart was in its original leatherette case. The bronze star with its V device was in a smaller box. There were patches from the 1st Marine Division, my dog tags, a faded photograph of my squad, and the official citations typed on heavy cardstock. I hadn't opened that box in maybe 10 years, but I knew it was there. Its presence was a quiet fact of the house, like the foundation. The change started gradually. Chloe became very interested in what she called home optimization. She watched home organization shows, read articles about minimalist living. She began talking about the weight of objects, about how physical clutter leads to mental clutter. She visit and make gentle, smiling suggestions. Frank, have you ever thought about digitizing all these photo albums? They take up an entire shelf. Or this basement is a time capsule. We could have a crew in here for a weekend and just liberate so much space for you. I'd smile and nod and change the subject. This was my house. Elena and I had bought it in 1975. Every book, every tool, every faded chair had a history that was mine to remember or forget. I didn't see it as clutter. I saw it as a life fully lived. Then about 8 months ago, Chloe's parents decided to downsize. They sold their house of 40 years and moved to a 2-bedroom condo in Florida. The process of clearing out their home was, according to Chloe, a traumatic nightmare. She told us over dinner one night, her voice full of sympathetic exhaustion, about the decades of accumulated junk, the difficult decisions, the dumpsters filled with what she called emotional landfill. She looked at me across the table and said, "Frank, you don't want to do that to Michael. You don't want to leave him with that kind of burden." Michael was quiet. I said, "I'm not planning on going anywhere just yet, Chloe." She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's not about that," she said. "It's about living lightly now. It's a gift to your family." The pressure intensified. It stopped being suggestions and started being proposals. Chloe offered to hire an organizer. She offered to come over herself and tackle a room. She framed it all as concern, as help. I declined, each time politely. I said I liked my house the way it was. I said I would handle my own affairs. Michael was caught in the middle. I could see it. He'd say things like, "Dad, she's just trying to help," or "She has a point about the basement. It is a lot of stuff." But he never pushed. Not until the Thursday everything changed. They came over for dinner. Chloe was buzzing with a kind of focused energy. Over pot roast, she announced that she had booked a dumpster. It was being delivered to my driveway on Saturday morning. "It's just for the day," she said. "Michael and I will be here at 8 a.m. We'll power through the garage and the den. We'll be done by dinner. You won't have to lift a finger, Frank. Just point at what stays." I set my fork down. "Chloe, I didn't ask for a dumpster. I didn't agree to this." "I know," she said, her smile unwavering. "That's why we're just doing it. Sometimes for people of your generation, the first step is the hardest. We're just removing the friction. I looked at Michael. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He pushed peas around his plate. Dad, it's one day. Let's just see how it goes. If you hate it, we stop. This wasn't my son talking. This was a man who had been worn down by a persistent, logical argument he couldn't find a way to refute. The argument that my life, my possessions, were a future burden he didn't want to carry. I felt a cold clarity settle in my chest. The dumpster will not be coming here, I said, my voice calm and low. This is not a discussion. My home is not a project to be managed. The rest of the dinner was silent and tense. They left early. I sat in my chair for a long time, listening to the clock tick, thinking about the walnut box on the high shelf. I decided then and there that I would move it. I would put it somewhere safe, somewhere private, maybe the safe deposit box at the bank. I just never got the chance. 2 days later, on Saturday, I had a routine doctor's appointment in the morning. I was gone for 2 hours. When I returned home, my heart just stopped. The garage door was open. Michael's car was in the driveway, and there in the den was Chloe. She was standing on a step stool, pulling everything off the top shelf of the bookcase and placing it into a large, black trash bag. The engineering manuals were already in a heap on the floor. And in her hand, as I stood frozen in the doorway, was the dark walnut box. "Chloe," I said. My voice sounded strange to me. She turned, startled, and almost lost her balance. "Frank, you scared me. I thought you'd be longer." She didn't put the box down. "What are you doing?" "We are helping," she said, stepping down. "We decided to just do a little bit, since you weren't here to stress about it. This shelf is just dust and old paper. We can get rid of all this and you'll never miss it." She gestured with the box, casually, as if it were an empty candy dish. "Even this old thing, it's probably full of broken pens or something." "Put that down," I said. It was not a request. She blinked, surprised by my tone. Then she shrugged, a hint of irritation on her face. She placed the box on the coffee table. "Fine, it's just a box of old junk, Frank. Look at this place. It's a museum of junk." Michael appeared in the hallway then, his face pale. "Dad, we were just..." "I want you both to leave," I said. "Now." They left. I didn't move until I heard their car pull away. Then I walked to the coffee table and opened the walnut box. Everything was there. The medals, the patches, the dog tags. I closed the lid and held it tightly. I decided that first thing Monday morning, I would take it to the bank. I would keep it safe. But Monday was too late, because on that Sunday, while I was at church, Chloe came back. She used the spare key we kept for emergencies. She took the black trash bag she had filled from my den shelf, and she took the walnut box from the coffee table where I had left it, thinking it was safe for one more night. She loaded it all into her car, and she drove it to the Goodwill donation center on Arlington Boulevard. She handed the box and the bag of old paper to a teenager working the drop-off lane. She received a receipt for a tax deduction, and she drove home, believing she had finally removed a piece of stubborn clutter from her family's path. The walnut box was placed on a rolling cart with hundreds of other donations. It was wheeled into the back of the store, sorted into a bin marked miscellaneous. And by Tuesday morning, it was sitting on a shelf in the store, priced at $4.99. It was about to be found by a stranger. And that stranger, unlike my own family, would immediately understand exactly what he was looking at. The man who found the box was named David. David wasn't a veteran. He was a history teacher and a collector. He visited that Goodwill every Tuesday morning, looking for old books, historic documents, anything with a story. When he saw the dark walnut box, he thought it might contain chess pieces or maybe silverware. He paid the $4.99, took it to his car, and opened the lid. He told me later that his breath caught in his throat. He recognized the Purple Heart immediately, the profile of George Washington, the heart-shaped pendant on its purple ribbon. He knew it was different. It wasn't a souvenir or a replica. It had weight. He gently opened the smaller case and saw the bronze star with the tiny, distinctive V device pinned to its ribbon, a bronze star for valor. That's when he knew this wasn't just lost. This was abandoned. David didn't go home. He drove straight to the local library, sat at a study carrel, and began his work. He had the dog tags, They had my name, Frank R. Miller, and my service number. He had the citation for the Bronze Star typed on that heavy cardstock. It described actions near the Chosin Reservoir in November of 1952. It used words like courage under relentless fire and voluntary repositioning to retrieve wounded comrades. It was signed by a commanding officer whose name David also wrote down. He spent the next 3 days digging. He used ancestry websites, veteran databases, old newspaper archives. He cross-referenced my name, my service number, my unit. He found my honorable discharge record. He found a brief article in the Springfield local paper from 1954 welcoming home several area boys, including Private First Class Frank Miller. He was building a profile, not of a soldier, but of a man who might still be alive. On the 4th day, he found a current address. It was my address. He also found a phone number listed. He sat at his kitchen table, looking at the phone, then at the open walnut box on the table. He knew what he had to do, but he dreaded it. How do you call an 81-year-old man and tell him you found his life's most sacred artifacts in a bargain bin? He dialed the number. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was in the backyard, raking the first of the fall leaves, when the kitchen phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. I'm glad I did. "Is this Frank Miller?" a cautious voice asked. "It is. Mr. Miller, my name is David Ellis. This is going to sound very strange. I believe I have something that belongs to you. I found a box of military items. It has your name on the dog tags." I leaned against the kitchen counter. The world narrowed to the sound of his voice. "A walnut box," I said, not as a question, but as a statement of a terrible fact. "Yes," David said, his voice full of relief and profound sadness. "A dark walnut box." I invited him to come over, right then. He said he would be there in 20 minutes. I hung up the phone and stood perfectly still in my silent kitchen. I felt a wave of nausea, not from anger yet, but from a deep, shuddering loss. The violation was absolute. She hadn't just taken a box. She had taken a part of my soul and sold it for a tax receipt. David arrived. He was a young man, maybe in his 40s, with a kind, earnest face. He carried the box with both hands like it was a relic. He didn't hand it to me immediately. He placed it gently on my kitchen table. "It's all here, Mr. Miller, everything." I checked. I opened the lid. There they were, my past, in polished metal and faded ribbon. I touched the purple heart case. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "You have no idea what this means." "I think I have some idea," David said quietly. Then he asked the question, "Mr. Miller, how did it end up there?" That's when the anger arrived. It was a cold, sharp, and focused thing. I told him. I didn't embellish. I just stated the facts. My daughter-in-law, the decluttering, the dumpster that never came, the visit while I was at church, the Goodwill on Arlington Boulevard. David listened, his face growing pale. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "She didn't know what they were?" he finally asked. "She called them old junk," I said. David looked down at the box, then back at me. "These aren't junk, Mr. Miller. A Purple Heart, a Bronze Star with a V in the collecting world. Among historians, these are incredibly significant. Their historical value is one thing, but what she did," he trailed off, shaking his head. "There are communities, online, veterans groups. They would see this as a desecration." I knew he was right. I had known it from the moment he called. The private betrayal was now colliding with a public standard, a standard of honor, of respect, that existed outside my family. After David left, I sat at the table with the box for an hour. Then I called Michael. I didn't yell, I was calm. "Michael, I need you and Chloe to come over, now." They arrived 40 minutes later. Chloe looked wary. Michael looked confused and anxious. I didn't offer them coffee. I pointed to the walnut box, centered on the table. "Do you recognize this?" Chloe's eyes flicked to it. She crossed her arms. "Frank, what is this about?" "Do you recognize it?" My tone left no room for evasion. She sighed, a theatrical sound of exasperation. "It's that old box from your shelf." "Yes." "Where was it on Sunday?" "I don't know, on the shelf." "It was on this table," I said, "and on Monday it was gone. Where did it go, Chloe?" The room was silent. Michael looked at his wife, his confusion deepening. Chloe, what's Dad talking about? She shrugged, a defiant little motion. I might have taken a few things to donate when I was over. I was just trying to help. You said yourself the place is overwhelmed, Michael. What was in the box, Chloe? I asked. How should I know? I didn't open it. It was heavy, it was old, it looked like junk. Her voice was rising, defensive. You didn't open it, I repeated. You took a sealed box that did not belong to you and you donated it to Goodwill. For God's sake, Frank, it was just a box. If it was so important, why was it buried on a shelf? Why wasn't it in a safe? It looked like trash. That word, trash, it hung in the air between us. I opened the box. I lifted out the purple heart in its case and set it on the table. Then the bronze star. I laid the citation beside them. I didn't say a word. Michael's face dissolved. He understood first. His eyes went from the medals to me to his wife. Chloe, he whispered, my God, those are Dad's. It's a couple of old medals, Chloe snapped, but her confidence was cracking. It's not the end of the world. We got them back, didn't we? Some guy called you, no harm, no foul. No harm, Michael's voice was trembling. You stole Dad's war medals and threw them in a donation bin. I didn't steal, I was helping. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You and your father emotionally attached to every piece of dust in this museum. It's not healthy. I watched my son see his wife clearly, perhaps for the first time. He saw the utter lack of comprehension, the total failure to grasp the magnitude of her action. It wasn't malice. It was something worse, a profound, dismissive carelessness. You need to leave, Chloe, Michael said, his voice low and firm. What? Get out, go home. I need to talk to my father. After she left, slamming the door, Michael broke down. He cried at my kitchen table, great heaving sobs of shame and anger. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I never thought she'd do that. I put a hand on his shoulder. I know. What can I do? He asked, his face ravaged. Nothing right now, I said, but I was wrong. Because David, the history teacher, was also a member of several online military history forums. That night, tormented by what he'd witnessed, he did what he felt was right. He didn't use our names. He didn't give the location. But he posted the story on a large, private Facebook group dedicated to Korean War veterans and their families. He described finding a Purple Heart and Bronze Star with valor at a thrift store. He described tracking down the elderly veteran, alive, and the heartbreaking reason the box was there. A family member had donated it during a decluttering, calling the contents old junk. He posted it as a cautionary tale, a reminder to veterans to secure their legacies. He ended his post with this line, "The veteran has his medals back, but I don't think he will ever get back the piece of himself that was discarded that day." The post did not stay quiet. It was shared, and then shared again. Within the closed ecosystem of that group, people began to dig. They cross-referenced details, the location of the Goodwill, the specific medals, the unit, the Chosin Reservoir. The story was too specific, and the digital sleuths were too dedicated. Within 48 hours, they had a name, my name. They found my obituary for my wife Alina. They found Michael's name, and through public records, they found Chloe. The story exploded out of the private group and into the wider world of social media. It was picked up by pages dedicated to military news, to veteran support, to outrage culture. The comments were a firestorm. She should be charged with theft. This is disgusting. What kind of monster does this? The son is just as guilty for allowing it. My personal tragedy was now public fodder, and the rage of thousands of strangers, veterans and their families and patriotic citizens was about to come crashing down on my family's head. It began with a phone call, not to me, but to Chloe. The first call was from a number she didn't recognize. A man's voice, cold and flat, asked if she was the woman who threw a Purple Heart in the trash. She hung up, shaken. Then her phone buzzed again, and again. By the end of that first day, Chloe had received 47 calls and over 200 text messages. They called her every name you can imagine, and some you probably can't. It wasn't just calls. People found her professional profile on the dental office website. Her work email was flooded. One-star reviews began appearing on the practices page, mentioning her by name. Wouldn't trust this woman to clean teeth, let alone with anything important. Disgraceful treatment of a veteran. Her boss, a kindly older dentist, called her into his office. He was understanding, but he was also practical. Chloe, this is a small family practice. This kind of attention, it's scaring patients. I need you to take a leave of absence until this blows over. She was sent home. The backlash had a target now, and it was laser-focused. It moved from the digital world to the physical one. Someone mailed a package to their townhouse. It wasn't a threat, not exactly. It was a book, a thick history of the Korean War. A passage about the Chosin Reservoir was highlighted in yellow. There was no note. Michael's job in it was less public-facing, but his colleagues had seen the story too. He got looks in the break room. Quiet conversations would stop when he walked in. His manager pulled him aside and said awkwardly, "Mike, maybe work from home for a bit, for everyone's comfort." Their home, which Chloe had worked so hard to optimize and perfect, became a prison. They drew the blinds. They jumped at every car that slowed down outside. The doorbell became an instrument of terror. One evening, a car parked across the street for an hour, its headlights pointed at their front window. No one got out. Then it drove away. Through all of this, Chloe's attitude shifted. The defiant, dismissive posture cracked under the relentless pressure. The reality of what she had done, not just to me, but to the thousands of people who saw her act as a sacrilege, began to sink in. It wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a verdict, delivered by a jury of strangers, and the sentence was total social annihilation. Michael called me, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "Dad, they've doxed us. Our address is online. People are sending things. We can't live like this." "Have you called the police?" I asked. "What would we say?" he replied, a bitter laugh in his voice. "That people are calling us names for something we actually did. The police can't stop the internet, Dad." I felt a complicated knot of emotions. There was no satisfaction in their suffering. This wasn't the justice I wanted. The cold anger I felt toward Chloe was now mixed with a dreadful pity and a growing fear for my son. Then the story found a new, more legitimate channel. A local news reporter from a DC affiliate picked it up. They framed it as a heartwarming story at first. Good Samaritan returns lost war medals to local hero. They interviewed David, the teacher. He was careful, respectful, but they also dug deeper. They called the Goodwill, confirmed the donation. They did a man on the street segment outside the donation center, asking people what they thought about war medals being donated. The outrage was universal and visceral. The news segment ended with the anchor saying, "The family member who made the donation declined to comment." And just like that, the story had the sheen of official truth. It was no longer a social media rumor, it was a reported fact. This triggered the second, more dangerous wave. The online sleuths, now emboldened by the news coverage, dug deeper into Chloe. They found her parents' Facebook pages. They found photos of her at family gatherings. They began commenting on their asterisk posts, asking how they raised someone so disrespectful. The blast radius was expanding, consuming everyone connected to her. It was at the height of this that I received my own unexpected contact. A man named James Harrigan called me. He introduced himself as the founder of a nonprofit called Purple Hearts United. His voice was gravelly, kind, and carried the weight of experience. "Mr. Miller," he said, "we've been following your story. First, let me say how sorry I am that you've had to go through this. We see it more often than you'd think." He explained that his organization worked to reunite lost or stolen medals with veterans or their families. They maintained a database of thousands of names. "What happened to you," he said, "is a veteran's worst nightmare, that tangible proof of your sacrifice treated like clutter. But sir, with your permission, we might be able to use your story to prevent it from happening to others." He asked if I would be willing to speak with him, to have my story added to their records as a case study. He was gentle but clear. The public needs to understand that these aren't just artifacts. They are living memory. They deserve respect. I agreed to talk. We spoke for over an hour. I told him about Korea, about the cold, about the friends I lost. I told him about Elena and about the quiet life we built afterward. And yes, I told him about Chloe and the dumpster that never came and the box on the shelf. He listened without interruption. At the end of the call, he said something that changed my perspective entirely. "Mr. Miller, may I ask, have you seen the citation for your Bronze Star recently, the original one from the Department of the Army?" "It's in the box," I said. "Would you mind reading it, the very last line on the bottom?" After we hung up, I took the citation from the walnut box. I had memorized the words describing the action long ago, but I looked at the bottom. There, in small, formal type, was a line I had forgotten was there. It listed the place of issue, Washington, D.C., and the date, April 17, 1954, and then the signature. It wasn't just my commanding officer's name typed beneath a line. It was an actual pennied signature, faded but unmistakable. The signature of the President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower. I sat down heavily. I had known a presidential signature was on there, theoretically, but seeing it, knowing that this piece of paper had been in the same room as the Supreme Allied Commander, that he had put his name to this record of my actions, it suddenly made the box feel impossibly heavy. This wasn't just my memory. This was a document of national history, and it had been priced at $4.99. I called Michael. "I need you to come over, alone." When he arrived, he looked years older. The light in his eyes was gone. I showed him the citation. I pointed to the signature. He stared at it for a full minute, his face ashen. "Oh, Dad," he whispered. "This isn't about clutter anymore, Michael," I said. "This is about something so much bigger than your wife's need to organize a house. She didn't just disrespect me. She disrespected a document signed by a president. She disrespected every man who never came home to get one of these. That's why the world is so angry. They understand what she didn't." Michael started to cry again, silent tears of pure shame. "What do we do? How do we make it stop?" I didn't have an answer, but the world was about to provide one in the most brutal way possible. A popular YouTube commentator, a former Marine with a channel dedicated to veteran issues, did a 20-minute segment on the story. He didn't just report it, he eviscerated it. He held up a replica Purple Heart. He talked about the blood and sacrifice it represented. He called Chloe's actions a spiritual crime. His video was titled "The Goodwill Betrayal." It got 3 million views in 2 days. The comment section was a war zone, but now, mixed in with the rage, were calls for specific, concrete action. People began calling the Virginia State Bar Association, asking if Chloe could be charged with theft or destruction of veterans' property. Others wrote to the dental board, demanding her hygienist license be reviewed for moral turpitude. An online petition started, demanding the local prosecutor investigate. It gathered 20,000 signatures in 48 hours. The story was no longer about outrage. It was about mobilization, a collective, furious will to see some form of punishment enacted. And that's when I got the visit from the 2 men in suits. They were from the Veterans Affairs Office of the Inspector General. They were polite, solemn. They asked if I would consider filing a formal statement. They explained that while what happened was morally egregious, the legal path was murky. The medals were my personal property, given to me. The act of a family member donating them, while ethically devastating, was a civil family matter, not clearly a federal crime. But they said the public pressure was creating a unique situation. They were exploring avenues. After they left, I felt a new kind of cold fear. This had gone beyond Facebook groups and news segments. The federal government was now exploring avenues. My private family tragedy was on the verge of becoming a legal case, and I was the only one who could decide whether to push it forward. That night, as I struggled to sleep, my phone lit up with a call. It was Michael. His voice was a broken whisper, barely audible. "Dad, you need to come to the hospital. Now, it's Chloe. She lost the baby." The world stopped. In all the fury, in all the conflict, no one had told me. Chloe was pregnant. They were going to have a child. And in the storm of hatred that I had, however unintentionally, unleashed upon them, that fragile new life had been lost. The foundation of my anger crumbled, replaced by a vast and terrifying emptiness. The medals on the table suddenly looked like what they were, pieces of metal. And I was left to wonder if the cost of getting them back was a price no one should ever have to pay. The hospital was a world of fluorescent light and hushed voices. I found Michael alone in a waiting room, his face a mask of utter devastation. He looked up at me, and in his eyes, I didn't see anger toward me or toward Chloe. I saw a loss so profound it had erased everything else. He just shook his head, unable to speak. I sat beside him and put my arm around my son. We didn't talk. We just sat there in the terrible, quiet aftermath. Chloe was discharged the next day. Michael brought her back to their townhouse. The online storm miraculously began to recede almost immediately. Someone had posted a brief, anonymous update in the veterans group. Family tragedy, please stand down. The mob, for all its fury, possessed a strange, brutal code. The news of the miscarriage seemed to drain the anger of its purpose. The calls and texts slowed to a trickle, then stopped. The internet moved on to its next outrage. But the damage was permanent. Chloe lost her job. The dental practice, sympathetic but pragmatic, made her leave permanent. The state board never filed a complaint, but the stain on her professional reputation was indelible. Michael eventually returned to his office, but he was a ghost there, a man marked by a public and private catastrophe. For weeks, I existed in a state of numb suspension. The walnut box sat unopened on my table. I would look at it and feel nothing but a heavy, cold guilt. I had wanted her to understand. I had wanted accountability. I never wanted this. A life, however small and new, had been sacrificed on the altar of this conflict. Michael came to see me one rainy afternoon in early spring. He looked thin, older. "She's seeing a therapist," he said quietly, "for the grief and for everything else. She talks about it now, Dad, what she did. She doesn't call it junk anymore. She calls it what it is. She says she was trying to control her own fear of loss by controlling your house, and she didn't see the humanity in the things she was touching." I nodded. It was the first time her actions had been framed in a way that made a tragic kind of sense. It wasn't an excuse, it was an explanation. "The therapist says we need to try to rebuild," Michael continued. "But we can't do it here. The house, this town, it's all haunted now. We're moving to Oregon. Her sister lives there. We need a clean start." My heart ached, but I understood. When? Next month. I didn't try to talk him out of it. A father's job is to give his children roots, and then the permission to use those roots to grow somewhere new, even if that somewhere is 2,000 miles away. The day before they left, Chloe asked if she could come over. Alone, I said yes. She arrived looking frail, but her eyes were clear. She didn't bring a casserole or make small talk. She sat at my kitchen table and looked directly at me. "Frank," she said, her voice steady but soft, "I am so sorry, not just for the medals, for the arrogance, for treating your home, your history, your grief for Alina as an inconvenience. I was wrong. What I did was unforgivable." "It was," I agreed quietly, "but that doesn't mean we stop being family." She cried then, not the performative tears of before, but deep, silent sobs of remorse. "I would give anything to take it back, not just for me, but for Michael, for you, for—" She couldn't finish. "I know," I said, and I did. Before she left, she asked one thing. "Would you show me the medals? I've never really looked at them." I brought the box to the table. I opened it. I didn't take them out. I just let her look. She stared at the Purple Heart for a long time, then at the Bronze Star, then at the citation with the faded signature. "Eisenhower," she whispered. "Yes, what you did to get these." "It wasn't about what I did," I said. "It was about what was lost. These represent the men who didn't get to come home. That's the weight. That's what you were holding." She reached out a tentative hand and touched the edge of the walnut box, a gesture of acknowledgement. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me." They left for Oregon. The house was quiet again, but the silence was different. It wasn't just Alina's absence I felt, it was Michael's. The future I had imagined, with grandchildren nearby, was gone. All that was left was the past, in a box on a shelf. I contacted the VA representatives and told them I would not be pursuing any formal statement. The matter for me was closed. I called James Harrigan at Purple Hearts United. I told him he could use my story anonymously if it would help. He thanked me, and he sent me a small, secure display case for the medals. I put them in it, but I still kept it on the shelf in the den. Not hidden, just present. Life moved on in its slow, stubborn way. I planted a garden. I had coffee with old friends. Michael called every Sunday, his voice growing gradually lighter as the distance and time began their slow work of healing. Then last fall, a certified letter arrived. It was from the office of a U.S. Senator from Virginia. The letter stated that, due to the unique circumstances and the public record of my service, they were inquiring if I would accept a replacement set of my medals, officially reissued by the Department of Defense, in a formal presentation. They framed it as correcting a record of disrespect. I read the letter 3 times, then I called Michael. I read it to him. He was silent for a moment. "What will you do, Dad?" "I don't need new medals," I said. "I have the originals. They're the ones that were there." But then I thought about it. I thought about the public story, the narrative of loss and recovery. I thought about the senator's office wanting a photo opportunity, a tidy ending. I called them back and politely declined. I told them the best recognition they could give me was to support legislation making it harder for veterans' medals to be sold or pawned, to increase funding for organizations like Purple Hearts United. I don't know if they did it, but it felt like the right thing to say. The surprising thing came a month later. A package arrived from Oregon. It was from Chloe. Inside was a simple, beautiful wooden frame, and inside the frame was not a picture, but a careful, handwritten transcription. She had copied word for word in her neatest handwriting the entire text of my Bronze Star citation. She had included the date, the unit, and at the bottom she had written, "Presented to Frank R. Miller with the deepest respect." She had even drawn a small, careful replica of the medal itself in the corner. It was an act of painstaking, penitent recreation. It was her way of proving she finally understood the words and the weight they carried. I hung that transcription on the wall in my den, above the shelf where the display case sits, the handwritten words alongside the official ones, a full, fractured circle. This past Christmas, Michael and Chloe flew back east. They came to the house. Chloe was quiet, but she was present. She helped me cook the meal. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about their new life, about the mountains in Oregon, about Michael's new job. As they were getting ready to leave, Chloe handed me a small, wrapped gift. "Open it later," she said. After they drove away, I opened it. It was a digital picture frame. I plugged it in, and it cycled through photos. Photos of them in Oregon, of mountains, of a new puppy, and then a photo of a sonogram, a new life due in the summer, a second chance. I am 82 years old now. I still live in the house Alina and I bought. The oak tree we planted is taller than the roof. I have my medals, and I have the citation in Chloe's handwriting on my wall. I have a son who calls me every Sunday from across the country, and I have the hope of a new grandchild. People ask me if I'm still angry. I tell them the truth. The anger is gone. What remains is a lesson carved deep. There are things in this world that are not disposable. Love is one, memory is another. The proof of sacrifice is a third. We protect them not because they are perfect, but because they are fragile. And we forgive not because the wrong wasn't great, but because the future demands it. The foundation holds, not because it is never tested, but because after the shaking stops, you look at what remains, you mend the cracks, you honor what survived, and you learn, finally, what was worth fighting for all along. So what do we do with a story like this? Do we file it away as a family drama, a cautionary tale about decluttering gone wrong, or do we let it ask us the harder question? What are the sacred things in our own lives that we've stopped seeing? We live in a time that worships the new, the clean, the optimized. We're encouraged to shed our past, to travel light, to curate our existence until it fits a perfect, minimalist image. But in that process, we risk becoming people who mistake weight for waste, who confuse memory with clutter. A family heirloom becomes a dust collector. A box of letters becomes a fire hazard. A set of war medals becomes old junk. But here is the irreducible truth. Civilization is not built by people who travel light. It is built by people who carry things, who carry stories, who carry traditions, who carry the proof of sacrifices made so that the rest of us could live in comfort and safety. When we lose the ability to recognize that weight, to honor it, we don't just lose a box of medals. We lose a piece of our collective soul. This story isn't really about goodwill or about a daughter-in-law's mistake. It's about a fracture in understanding. It's about the quiet space between generations, where one person's treasure can so easily become another person's trash if we don't do the work of passing on the meaning. That work is a responsibility. It's the veteran sitting down with his grandson and saying, "This medal is for my friend who didn't come home." It's the mother showing her daughter her own mother's wedding band and saying, "This is the love that built our family." We have to be storytellers, we have to be keepers of the flame, because objects don't speak for themselves, they only speak through us. And if we stay silent, if we treat the past as a burden to be cleared out every spring, then we are committing a slow, cultural suicide. We are donating our own history, piece by piece, to a future that won't know what any of it means. My story had a measure of peace, but it came at a cost no family should ever pay. Let that be the warning. Look around your own home. What's in your attic? What's in that drawer you never open? What's the story attached to it? Find out, write it down, tell your children, give the weight a name. Because a world without sacred objects is a world without anchors, and a person without anchors will eventually drift away from everything that ever mattered. If this story made you think, if it made you feel that pull to remember what's important, then my purpose in telling it is served. I'm Frank Miller. Thank you for listening. And if you want to hear more stories that aren't afraid to ask what we are fighting for, consider joining this channel. There's always another story waiting to be told.